Hello everyone, this is Claudiu Murgan, the host of the Spiritually Inspired show, and my guest today is Tim Noe. Uh, Tim is a member of Humanities team and a student teacher of A Course in Miracles. Tim appreciates the simplicity of truth. He is the author of Take Out the X, A Guide to External Peace. He graduated from Duke University with a degree in physics and worked on several solopreneur endeavors before working with Humanities team. Tim lives in his RV in Las Vegas, Nevada, with his cat, Pachamama, and her two daughters, Malkia and Rachel. He is completing a Master of Public Administration at UNLV. He enjoys rendering 3D fractal images and studying sacred text. Tim, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you, Claudia, for having me. Much appreciated. And I have to just say off the bat, yes, we're in the RV with the cats, and sometimes they jump in front of the screen. They'll jump in all over the place. So apologies right off the bat.
Oh, enjoy that. You look like a quite young fellow to me, and I'm impressed with your activity and involvement with Humanities team. How did you join them and why?
So I joined. I started working with Humanities team. Let's see, it has to be about 2 years ago from now. This was 2 years ago. I had just started living in my RV. This is an RV that I'm in right now, and I just started living in here and traveling across the country. I'm in the United States, and my mother actually was involved at the time with Global Oneness Day, and she put me in touch with the team here because I had been involved with video editing, so we were in touch. I was open to helping with video editing. I needed some sort of additional income. It helped me. It was a very small stipend to start with Humanities team, and I worked with the video editing. So for the courses for the Science of Self-Empowerment, I helped to edit the videos down to their current status and taking out certain things, putting certain introductory clips in there. And the more that my journey unfolded in this spiritual journey, which is sometimes brings really romping cats with it, I had set out to pursue one thing on my journeys. I was very much into making music, and I had made a bunch of light equipment that I made myself. I made it to complement my music. I spent much time making these lights, and I wanted to shine in the sense of playing music and with lights that I made, and I took pride in the fact that I made these and that nobody else had these, and this was my vision of launching across the country to travel and play this music and play these lights for everybody. But as this journey unfolded, the more it became apparent to me that this was not the sort of shining that I was called to do. I had made it very complicated. I had, just as ego does, I had, right as I was launching on this journey, I had begun studying A Course in Miracles, and A Course in Miracles uses the language of ego and psychology. So in this sense, ego makes things very complicated sometimes. I had assumed that I would have to make all these different things, and I would have to assemble everything and all these complications. And it turns out I was called to shine in just a much different way, a much simpler way, to shine truth, to shine as a way of being, shine as just interactions with folks, and just focusing on shining as a way of being with anybody who is called to do the same. And this is what Humanities team does. So the more that this became known to me, the more that Humanities team, the work that Humanities team is doing just became much more resonant with me. And so working with the team, I had yearned to take on more than just simple video editing. I just branched out into other things and more things and more things, and we began to work a bit more collaboratively, and eventually it must have been about a few months ago by now that I just agreed that, okay, humanities team full time is just best for me and best for humanities team. And now it's just a very exciting time to be a part of humanities team. It is this growing platform for sharing this spirituality, sharing this truth and wisdom, sharing this way of being, sharing what we all have learned from sacred texts or New Age texts or science, any outlet that brings us truth. Humanities team is providing this foundation, this base for us all to gather like this and share our light. So thank you, Claudiu. I hope sometimes lose track of time when speaking of these things. So sorry.
It's a wonderful platform, and I know you guys have wonderful guests. And I recently watched, Greg Braden and Bruce Linton and Lynn McTaggart doing a fantastic program. So you mentioned ego, and this subject came up in other discussions with my previous guests as well. So what did you learn about ego? Is it something we have to suppress? Is it something we have to embrace, tame? How exactly does it work for you?
So, and I think I caught most of that question, asking if ego is something that we have to suppress. Now, I will say that A Course in Miracles is just such an awesome text. It is completely life-changing, perspective-changing, and so that's life-changing. Ego is one of the critical components of A Course in Miracles. A Course in Miracles is I'd say my favorite text. If I were to have a favorite single text, it's A Course in Miracles. And A Course in Miracles is scribed from the reference point of a psychologist. So it uses psychology to express these spiritual, eternal truths that we're all called to know. Now, ego is one of these terms that's lumped under psychology, and A Course in Miracles defines ego in its own way. Now, I must preface this all by saying that A Course in Miracles, just as any other text, any other sacred text or way of thought, is simply a tool of thought. So the presentation that it offers is just a tool. It's not claiming to be objective truth. I like to think of it as a hammer. If we have a hammer, it wouldn't make sense for us to ask, is the hammer true? If we ask this question, we're missing the point of what the hammer is for. A better question is, how can I use this hammer? How can I use this hammer to help my own experience? This is the question that is more fundamental to A Course in Miracles. Not so much, is this objectively true? Is it right? Is it helpful? It is helpful. So how can I use A Course in Miracles to greaten, to extend my own understanding of myself? So in this text, ego is framed essentially as anything that is limited. Ego is any idea of identity that holds a limit with it. Now, what does this mean? This means any name. A name is a limit, because to go by any one name, we're excluding all other names. So a name is a limit. Any sort of number, whether it's age or income, salary, any sort of number is a limit. Any history that we have, anything that we have done or haven't done is a limit, because we're excluding everything else from that. Just as our age, our income is a limit, because there's always something more. Any number is less than infinity. No matter how large it seems to be, no matter or small, it's limited. So ego is this thing that limits us. It's just a belief. It's not true. It's the idea that who we are is limited, and it can fall under the disguise of many disguises. This is the thing about ego. It has seemingly all these countless faces, all these different uh, uh, illusions associated with it. Ego can be a so-called inflated ego, to think that we we own more than somebody else. This is an inflated ego. Or a deflated ego, to think that we have less than anybody or everybody else. Both are ego. Both are thoughts that we are limited. Any any idea that limits is ego. So any name that we put to it, any circumstance, any history, our role, um, our family situation, our title, all of these are part of ego. All of these, A Course in Miracles shows us to look at these things as special roles that we're playing. We are not we are not identifying as the role. We're not identifying as the ego, as the limited self. We are the unlimited eternal self that is playing these roles. We exist here, and this role, this ego that we're playing, is playing in time. But who we are is eternal, not bound by time. Time is another one of these ego concepts that, you know, you're born at a specific date and you die at a specific date. This is a finite, this is a limited existence. So all of these ideas of limit, and if we just keep this in mind, limit, and we become more open-minded to seeing things that we may not have ever associated with ego into our mind. I know a lot of my own friends tend to put others ahead of self, because it's kind of a rebelling against ego. It's well, I don't want to be selfish, so I'll do more for them than for myself. But this is also an ego state of mind, because we're making a distinction between others and ourself. So to get back to your question, Claudiu, is it something to be repressed? No, it is not something to be repressed. The ego would love this thought of repressing the ego, because it's an active pushing away. We're trying to keep ego aside, and all the while we're keeping ego here because we have it in mind. Ego is something to be seen through. In physics, uh, with collisions, when particles, if something, there are three different types of interaction with particles. If we say a baseball, or some sort of ball in myself, if a baseball were to hit me and bounce off, this is very high energy. So my own self is taking all of the energy of the baseball and then putting more into it to reflect it. So this is what it similar to uh, pushing away the ego. We're actually putting more energy into it. There's another type of collision, which is just a bounce and stick. This still takes energy, because we're absorbing all the energy of the ego. If we kind of internalize it, we take ego and we just shove it down, we forget about it. But there's another type of interaction, which is non-interaction. If something just passes right through and doesn't interact, not in a destructive way, just passes right through, doesn't even interact, just as all these neutral particles, electrically neutral particles from the sun, are just coursing through the earth, coursing through our body right now, because they don't interact with us. They just pass through. They don't harm us, but they pass right through. So as far as we're concerned, our body, these particles don't exist. Same thing with ego. We just let it pass through. We see through it. We don't allow it to take some sort of substance in our mind by pushing it away.
And that attitude is related to awareness and observance of how we act and what we do on a daily basis. And my favorite approach to dealing with ego, which I heard and I felt it a little bit, is when you surrender to the divinity and you are being reborn, and that gives you a different perspective to your life, to everything around you. And we'll get into the concept of oneness, and that takes you there. I mean, you somehow you understand that you melted into the infinity, and you take it from there. You move with a different perspective on everything you do.
It's a beautiful way to put it, melting into infinity. And I have to ask you, Claudiu, have you experienced personally this sort of surrender? Have you felt a major surrender in your life?
Yes, several months ago, I did, I used plant medicine for the first time, and I was able to feel that type of melting and surrender and feeling one with nature at that particular time. It was done outdoors, and it was a beautiful moment.
Beautiful. And I think that are drawn to a spiritual path, a spiritual calling, all have experienced this moment of just supreme surrender, of just giving up, relinquishing what we have previously thought our identity was, and just saying, whatever this was is not working, so I'm willing to see things new. There's just this common thread that unites us all in awakening.
Exactly. So did you have a definitive moment in your life when you thought that, okay, spirituality is the way to go, or any type of religion or sacred text? What influenced you to take this path?
I have always been spiritual, but there were, I'd say, I was spiritual, but still clinging on to many of the values of the ego world, the ego realm. So being spiritual, often this is kind of masked as this whole manifesting physical things and ego traits, qualities, fame and fortune, these sorts of things. These don't really mesh with spirituality because they're contradictions. It's, A Course in Miracles teaches us that that we can't be fully committed sometimes. We're fully committed, or if we're not, then we're not committed at all. If we're going back and forth between spirituality and values of this illusion world, and all that's really saying is that we haven't made the choice to be fully committed. So I was in this in-between values of world, spirituality. My mother is Karen Noe. She's a psychic medium, author of books and We Consciousness, among others. So I was raised, going to school, being driven to school, and listening to Abraham gatherings with Esther Hicks. So this has always been a part of my life, spirituality. But as I embarked on this journey across the country in my RV, I had set out to go to Burning Man Festival, and I drove out with a dear friend of mine, Willie Wright, and we made it across the country with just a wish and a prayer, more of a prayer than a wish. And to me, this, I know there's a lot of different connotations with Burning Man, and I know there's some people hold it as a certain way. For me, it was a burning of ego. I had gone to Burning Man to bring all my lights that I had made, to play my music, and to put on a grand show. And really what resulted was just that I saw through it all and burnt this ego and left it behind. This was a time where I was in incredible amount of debt. I had debt collectors calling my family and my friends, and but simultaneously reading A Course in Miracles and studying A Course in Miracles and letting it soak in. So it was kind of this time of putting illusion and truth right next to each other so that it was just incredibly obvious. And from this point of leaving ego behind, burning the man ego, leaving ego behind, I don't need to burn it again. I don't need to return and do this again. It's just a one-time thing. If you see, it's like the Matrix. I'm not sure if you've seen the Matrix, Claudiu, but you're given the option of the blue pill or the red pill, and there's no going back when you choose the red pill. It's just we're awake. So this was with hindsight, the start of my own full dedication to spiritual life, spiritual living, spiritual life being, spiritual embodiment in every encounter, in every moment.
So
sure.
during the Burning Man, you experience humbleness, if I can say so.
Oh, I was humbled. I was absolutely humbled. I bring it all back to A Course in Miracles because this text just says it all. But how A Course in Miracles came into being is the two people who brought it into being, the scribe and the Helen Schuckman and her partner, her colleague William Thetford. They were in a very competitive, very academic, rigorous setting. And they were much held to the values of this world, to the values of this physical ego world, and they were fed up. They were brought to a point where they were fed up, and they said there must be a better way. Whatever we're doing doesn't work, and so we're open. We're giving the willingness to see things in a new way. This is entirely what happens to me. I was brought to a point where I just knew there had to be a better way. Whatever I had thought was true, and whatever I thought about myself and what was valuable was misguided. And I don't think it's required that we be brought kind of to a crumbling, desolation to realize this, but it tends to help. It tends to help to see through it all. So,
Tim, in one of the lessons from the Course in Miracles, there is one statement which jumped at me. The way to recognize your brother is by recognizing the Holy Spirit in him. And this is a teaching common in Christianity, Hindu, Buddhism. Why do you think that is not being applied in today's environment?
I think it's important to ask ourselves, what is it that's not happening? If we're not seeing the Holy Spirit in our brothers, then we're actually bringing that more into awareness collectively. So it doesn't really matter so much as why does this not happen, or why is this the case? Why are things the way they are? As much as how should we see things right now? So in A Course in Miracles, it says on this whole section of what it calls the dynamics of ego, which is kind of a paradox. It says you're very curious about how the ego came into being, and in the sense of wanting a historical answer to it. But it's not even necessary because it still happens right now. So we don't even need to think about the past when certain things still happen right now. If we still identify with ego right now, why do we need to look to the past as to why it was formed in the first place? So I don't think it's necessary to think about why people may not see the holiness in every encounter or in every person, as much as just being the example, seeing the Holy Spirit, seeing holiness in every person and every moment, because once we're seeing this, there's this this study, this effect called the Pygmalion effect. This is a study that has been conducted years ago. What they did is they approached these school teachers before the start of a school year. They had taken IQ tests from all the children, and they got the results. They approached the school teachers before the start of the year, before they ever met the children, and said, hey, FYI, these students in your class, they are primed to be intellectual blossomers this year. They said, you know, we took the IQ test, and these kids fit the bill for just, you know, being incredibly brilliant, just letting this unfold this year. So that they didn't do anything with, they didn't ask the teachers to do anything with this. They just told them. They just said it as kind of almost a fact. The school year progressed, and as it turns out, these students that were picked out did perform much greater than most of the other students. They were intellectual bloomers. They received higher grades than most others, statistically significant higher. If we fast forward to the end of the year, what's interesting about this study is that the IQ tests of these particular students that became intellectual bloomers were not any higher. They were actually average. The students who were pinpoint were average according to the IQ test. Furthermore, to extend this, when the students retook the IQ test at the end of the year, these same students actually scored higher on their IQ test, much higher than the other students who did not receive this treatment. So what this study shows us is that not only it wasn't the teacher's perception of these students in itself, it's not that the teacher graded these students more favorably. The perception of the teacher actually made these students smarter, made them more intellectual. The teacher's perception of these students has an active contribution to who these students become. So this is a study that's called the Pygmalion effect. And this is the effect, this is the spiritual truth, is that our perception is not a passive observation. It's an active contributor to how our world unfolds. So to tie it to this question, when we choose to see, you know, the teacher chose to perceive the students as intellectual bloomers, they became intellectual bloomers. If we have in mind that all that we see, everyone is awakening, everyone is the Holy Spirit, it actually brings that, not just in our experience of it, but in our brother's experience of it too. So, you know, I'm not sure if I can give an answer to why this has been historically the case, but the solution is to observe everyone as the Holy Spirit.
Yeah, it's a beautiful answer. And one of my guests, in fact, talked about this test. He did it himself with his students, and his conclusion was that he was vibrating in such a way that the students got the information even before he was able to speak out that information. And the second part of the test was when his mind was not involved with the students, where he was detached from what he's supposed to teach. And that showed into their results, the test results, that they were poor compared to previous sessions. So indeed, that tells that, you know, vibration, intention, and how we see things around us creates our environment, good or less good.
Absolutely. And you know, it's kind of this is not limited to teachers and students, clearly. You know, A Course in Miracles says that we're all teachers. We're all teaching in every moment, whether we're conscious of it or not. the question is, what are we teaching? What are we teaching in every moment? We could be in a room by ourselves, quarantined, as many of us are, and in this seemingly isolated space, actively teaching the world by just our mental state, by our perception, by our thinking, and how we choose to see it. So we're all teachers here. We're all children. We're all learners. The only way that we can teach is by learning. The only way that we can learn is by teaching. So thank
Yes,
you.
and I like to say that every teacher needs a teacher. And I did vlog about this subject a while back, and it's a very interesting concept. And I was told again, one of my guests on previous interviews, he was taking some Tai Chi lessons with a Chinese master. And the first thing that came out of the master's mouth was, "I'm not here to teach you Tai Chi, but I'm here to make it as simple as possible for you to steal it from me." Because he was considering himself a master. He was learning every day. So it's different mindset, very interesting mindset.
Absolutely.
And staying on the concept of now, most of us live either in the past or the future, aiming for something new. And as you mentioned, we forget about the now, the present. What do you think is required for today's generation, and even for my generation, 50s and higher, to go back to that concept of now and live in the moment?
I love this question. Thank you. I think first things first, write down every single goal that you have. Every goal that you have. And once you have every goal that you have, whether you bring it all to conscious surface, take this, burn it, throw it in the trash, put it in the compost heap, flush it down the toilet. All of these, forget them. Forget the goals. All these goals are really kind of, I think I have an idea of something that is not here, that if it were brought here, here would be better. All of these goals are really saying, I wish here and now were different. To hold any goal, I want to achieve such and such and such, is saying, I'm not okay with here now. Now, we typically don't think of it this way, but it really is. It really is saying it, any sort of goal. Also, this goal that we set is often limiting the unfolding of our perfection, of our divinity. The ego, only ego is setting goals. Only the ego is setting goals, putting numbers on. I understand that there's a time and place for putting numbers on things and shooting for a particular number. Great. But often holding these things, these personal goals, these individual goals, is selling ourselves short. A Course in Miracles puts it very nicely with goals, is just forget all these goals are putting blocks, are trying to steer our own unfolding, our own divinity in a particular direction, and we're actually selling ourselves short. To think that ego knows what's best for ourselves. Now, ego doesn't even know, how many fibers are in our shirt. Ego doesn't know the weight of ourself to the nearest thousandth of a pound. Ego doesn't know these things, but spirit knows these things. Spirit knows us, who we are, not ego. Spirit knows who we are, our identity, fully. Spirit knows everything about us, everything. So aligning with spirit, we don't even have to worry about these goals. We don't have to worry about these plans and these goals and how things should look and how we want things to look. Things are just brought our way. This is another teaching of that's told through the sacred texts of not worrying about the future. Whatever needs to be said will be brought to us. Spirit will bring all the words to us in this moment. Spirit will guide us to where we need to be. We don't need to plan it out. We must not plan it out because it'll interfere with this process. So forget about all these goals. Forget about the past. Past is gone. Past is not our identity. It goes hand in hand. So the more that we're concerned with the goals, the more that we're reaching into the past. They go hand in hand. So if we forget about the goals, we're also forgetting about the past. And we can limit it. A Course in Miracles frames for forgetting of the past as forgiveness. Often it's this forgiveness of all that is not here. Forgiveness is a self-forgiveness of all our misperceptions of the past. So if we can let go of our past, all, everything of the past that is not of love is gone. Everything that is love is remembered and still here. So past is not here. If we can forgive ourselves of the past, of things, maybe mistakes or guilt that we may feel, if we can forgive ourselves of these things, then we naturally extend it onto everyone and everything that we see. We allow everyone the forgiveness of our collective past. So it starts with self, to come from here and forget about the past, forget about what past is just a distraction from now, goals are a distraction for now. Who I am is here now. And so I don't need the past to clutter this here now. And sharing this, just holding this, not bringing it up in conversation usually. I mean, this is not, I love to speak about this, but it's rare that we get to speak about this. Often it's just an encounter at the store where there are 3 words to be said, and it's thank you. I know it's 4 words, but our way of being is communicated through this. It's like by forgiving ourselves, we give everyone permission to just exhale and be still and be at peace.
A lot of people are driven by goals. This is how they motivate themselves to move forward. It's purpose, life purpose, and things related to that. So are you saying that we should shift our life purpose from material and tangible things to a more immaterial aspect of our life, and not force things to come out and just wait for signals and for signs? Or how exactly should we look at this?
It is a nice question. So there is a divine, I like to say that spirit often doesn't communicate in English. It's very rare, or any language for this matter. It's often an immaterial language, just a knowing. If we set out an agenda and are tied to it, then we may miss the nuances that are here, that's in our heart of maybe I should go to the store right now, or maybe I should send a message to such and such friend. We may forget about this. We may neglect it. In terms of goals, there's often these bridges, these tools that serve as bridges. And I'd say a bridge, it may be difficult to live by goals and then just forget about goals. I understand. Maybe we can set one goal. And our one goal is to be fully here now. That is our one goal. And it's still a step, because by setting the goal, we're kind of acknowledging that we're not here now. So it's still a step. But if we can forget about the goals and just, because what else do we really want? But to be here now fully. To be here now fully is the fullest glory. There's nothing that we need. This is the peace. This is, we don't need anything else. We don't need to get this. I thought that I needed to build a hotel to get this, but it's just right here, So if we can just acknowledge this and to be in this state of not needing anything, and to recognize it, then we're carrying that, we're sharing this in every encounter. So maybe we don't get rid of every goal. We make it our one goal to be here now. And this may take different words, it may take different forms for different people, but the content is the same: to be here now, to be fully present, to be in spirit, to be divinely guided, to be the conduit for infinite intelligence. All of these are saying the same thing.
Thank you. Nicely put. What can you tell us about your book?
So my book is called Take Out the X, A Guide to External Peace. So this is my way of putting onto paper some of the teachings and learnings, some of the gleanings from A Course in Miracles that I had thought most valuable in my own understanding. And it's an illustrated, it's the book, but it's mostly pictures, so it's a very easy, light read. I'll send you, I don't know if you have a copy, but I'll send you one, and we can perhaps share it with the audience here. It's a PDF, it's online. And it is essentially, as the title says, the guide to external peace. How do we have external peace? By taking out the X, eternal peace. What does this mean? It's this whole identity of with the eternal, not the external. External is always limited, always outside ourselves, always unattainable. You know, this question is typically framed as, you know, when we'll have world peace when such and such happens, or let's do these so that we may have world peace. But this is an ego perspective. This is, we need to change the circumstances and then things will be right. It's exactly the same thing. So world peace is seeing that world peace is right now. It starts in our own understanding, in our own experience. To have peace fully here, this is world peace, and it's shared. And there may be, I understand there's rebuttals, what about this and this? It's always our choice to be at peace. This is the teaching of Jesus, of the historical Jesus, is that Jesus was at peace, even when being crucified and ridiculed in the most public and shameful of deaths. Jesus maintained a peace. And this is an extreme example. We're not called to do this extreme example necessarily, but we can be at peace, even when it seems like we're being crucified, we're being ridiculed. We have the choice to see through it. And this is the aspect of identity that is so critical, is by identifying with the eternal self, with the spirit self, or perhaps the mind self, by aligning with the divine, infinite intelligence. All of these are unbound by time, unbound by space. External peace is all about circumstances and space and hinges. All our own peace can hinge upon it. But if we flip it and we identify with eternal peace, we identify with world peace, we experience it ourselves, but in our own experiencing it, we're bringing it into creation, just as Pygmalion has shown us. We're actually bringing it into this world, into this physical reality.
And having internal peace will affect us less. The surroundings will affect us less because we create, as we discussed, the environment, and the internal peace is much deeper than our circumstances surrounding us. So it's a much better option to pursue.
Absolutely. And one thing I'd like to extend with this is I'd like to just bring one example here. If we have made it our goal to be here now at peace, and we encounter somebody who is testing this peace, let's say, whether it's through a verbal altercation or some sort of seeming attack, because we have set this goal, and if we have equipped ourselves with the proper tools of thought to recognize what's going on, we see this immediately for what it is, and all it is but a request for peace. If somebody is trying to take our peace away, all this is a request for peace. So we're called to give peace. We're called to share peace in this moment. And we can take this this high tension environment and just let it go into a peaceful, we can transform it into the peace that is here. So it is an all-powerful way of being, because what do we all want but the peace, but world peace that's right here now.
And one of my approaches is when I'm in a difficult situation, or if I head to a tough meeting, I will just say, my soul, please go ahead and talk to the souls of those people who I'm going to meet and tell them that I come in peace, and let's have a decent and productive discussion. And I can tell you that it worked every single time. It's just unbelievable.
This is beautiful. I like that.
We talk a lot about A Course in Miracle, where people can go and check it out and take it and, learn about it.
So A Course in Miracles, if you just search it, I believe there's a website, A Course in Miracles Now.org or .com, one of the two, and all of the text is on there. You can read it online and you can search through it. There's a search function. You can read all of the chapters. That may be a good place to start. I'd also highly recommend getting a copy of the book. There's a few different versions. Whatever version you're called you're drawn to is probably the right one. And what I'd really recommend is if you're kind of tap dancing around A Course in Miracles, or if you're already a student of it, is to join our humanities team. We host weekly discussion group of A Course in Miracles every Sunday at 4 Pacific. You can sign up. You can sign up to get notifications through humanitiesteam.org. And if you navigate over to A Course in Miracles, let me just put it in chat for you, Claudiu. This is a place where you can sign up to receive notifications to join us every Sunday. There's a Zoom link, and we just have a gathering. We're reading through the text section by section, and we speak of it. And all these different perspectives speaking on this really reinforce the concepts, because A Course in Miracles can be fairly dense and daunting for somebody that is not familiar with the language. It uses a very precise and technical language, and language that is often been misconstrued. It's biblical language, so Holy Spirit and Christ and God. A lot of folks have a different connotation with these words than how it's presented in A Course in Miracles. So I certainly recommend signing up for the discussion group. We all have a nice time refining our own understanding. There's a few different components of this text. There's a text, which is my favorite. There's also a workbook. A workbook just has a daily thought exercise. It's kind of a supplement to this text. So every day you wake up and you start the day with this daily thought exercise. Also recommended. I think it's a nice supplement. On this link that I've shared, there's a daily workbook emails that is free that you can sign up for and get one a day. Now, A Course in Miracles, the only insistence it has of how to take it is that you don't take more than one lesson per day. It says you can read it in whatever order you want. There's a manual for teachers. It says you can read that first if you want. Just don't take more than one lesson a day, because it's designed to reshape our subconscious. How it's written, and the exercises are presented in such a way that we're actively reforming our subconscious understanding of ourselves. So to assist with this, I have a daily workbook email delivery system that it's kind of a bit of a spin-off from the workbooks. The essence is there, just a different framing of them, and it's delivered such that it only sends you the next workbook if you've opened the previous one. So it keeps us true to the one per day. But all these are just part of Humanities Team, and welcome for anybody to join. So thank you.
So other than becoming a pillar at Humanities Team, what other projects do you have? Writing another book or pursuing with the music career?
I do love music, and my form of music today is I am uh, translating is the word that comes to mind. Translating a text with Karen Gordon is a fellow teammate on at Humanities Team, and we are currently translating this text. It's not so much a dictation, it's not so much a channeling, as much as a translating, and it's called A Discussion of Origin, Clarity with Christ. And so we are actively bringing this into being. I've always been fascinated by the inception of A Course in Miracles, which has been described as a rapid interdictation. Helen describes herself as a scribe. She just wrote the words that came to mind, and I've always been fascinated with this. And in this sort of receptivity to be something like this, to be a scribe, and it just became obvious to me that starting on this sort of scribing process, that I'm called not so much to scribe, and this is ego self. This is Tim Noe speaking. Tim is not so much being called to scribe as to translate. These concepts are given kind of as an abstraction, and translating these concepts into English through the certain disciplines that I've experienced in this life. I'd say it's very similar to A Course in Miracles, but rooted more in mathematics and equation and planes and functions and graphs, this sort of thing. So very excited. You're actually one of the first, maybe one of the first few people that I've told about this, Claudiu. So thank you for the question.
Tim, thank you very much for joining me. It's been a pleasure. Very interesting discussion. Peace, love, and gratitude to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Claudiu. Love you and God bless.
God bless.